So, customer service. Let's actually start with you, Peter. Government isn't really known for customer service. In fact, if you were to ask most of the people on the street to draw a picture of government, it would probably be represented by, I would guess, the Division of Motor Vehicles, in most states, which of course not a federal function, but kind of epitomizes for many people the idea of long waits in line, people who seem designed, you get to the head of the line and, oh no, it's that line over there, all those kinds of procedures. Now, you've come in from the private sector into a very, very large agency that is really supposed to be serving people who have served our country.
Right.
And what's your experience been about the customer service orientation of the Veterans Administration and how you make it better?
Yeah. Boy, that's a broad question. It's a hard question. When we took office about a year and a half ago, I think that the perception, it wasn't really the reality, but it was the perception, certainly of our stakeholders and probably of most Americans, that the VA had this very manual, very paper-bound, very adversarial relationship to veterans and to the veteran service organizations that serve them outside the VA. And two of those things were true. It's very manual and it's very paper-bound. And so they hired me and a couple of guys like me to just start thinking about how we change sort of the infrastructure of the place. And it's not very glamorous, but it's really important, right? You're not going to be able to deliver the kinds of customer service that especially the young veterans, not just them, but especially them, coming back from service in Iraq, coming back from service in Afghanistan, where they've got GPS in one hand and a cell phone in the right, and here comes the VA with a mountain of forms, and fill these things out, and we'll think about maybe subsidizing your education, right? That's not exactly the way we should be doing things. But the last thing was not true, that somehow we were adversarial. I didn't see it. I don't see it today. And so what we're trying to do is really sort of match the business processes and the underlying infrastructure to what already did exist. So you have a 300,000 person workforce, about 2/3 of them involved in the delivery of medical services, most of the rest in support roles or in the benefits delivery. We run one of the nation's largest banks. We support a lot of mortgages, insurances, education, and so forth.
What's the bank?
It's the life insurance company and the loan guarantees for mortgages, the VA home loans. So all of these things are sort of segmented, because if we also run obviously a very large cemetery program, right? So all these programs are segmented, but yet there's a tremendous commonality of we really do want to provide better customer service. We just don't have the tools, we don't have the training, we don't have the infrastructure to do it. So the secretary comes in and basically changes all that, right? The secretary comes in and says, well, the good news is that you want to, and now we've got to be able to match your desire with the underlying systems and the underlying business processes. And that's been the most satisfying and gratifying part of my job in the first year.
All right, we'll come back to that. So Thor, just for the people who aren't familiar with Get Satisfaction, perhaps you can start by just giving us a picture of what you do, who you do it for, why it's better.
Sure.
And then I guess how it might apply to government.
Government, sure. So we provide a web platform that allows organizations to set up customer communities that are based on conversations that are outcome focused. So by outcomes, I mean questions get answers, problems get solutions, ideas are proposed and advanced or rejected into improvements. And this is done by customers or constituents talking to each other, and by involvement from people within the organization. Really is about creating collaboration spaces at the edge of an organization.
I certainly know when we use it at O'Reilly, it's fabulous for me as the CEO to see questions bubbling up from customers. And if they're ones that I feel like I'm the best person to answer, I can go answer them directly. And that kind of porous boundary, I think, is certainly one aspect of customer service. I was in a meeting recently with Kim Rackmiller, who used to run customer service at Amazon. And the way she described how they empower their customer service reps was by saying, well, so imagine you're Jeff Bezos and you're answering the phone and you hear that every time this table gets shipped, it's arrived scratched. What do? You say, stop shipping that table, figure out what the heck is wrong. He says, so that's the power we gave to our customer service reps. Any one of them can pull a ripcord and stop the line because they get that there's a problem that needs to be fixed. And so there's that kind of interesting idea of breaking down hierarchy implicit in, I think, in get satisfaction.
Yeah, and there's another thing too, which was always important to us, which is that when you're inside an organization, you can get into a kind of bunker mentality, particularly if you're trying to serve millions of customers, and it's very expensive to serve those customers. So you automate and you script the interactions. But what happens when you move to a conversational environment is that people, whether they're customers or they're people, employees, they can be themselves. They can bring their own experiences to help people out in a way which is just not possible in a more mechanical environment.
So how does something like this apply at the VA? I assume that your typical kind of quote customer service request, somebody being admitted to a VA hospital, trying to get benefits of various kinds. These are typically fairly, as you say, paper-bound, bureaucratic process. How do you make it better? What's your?
It's a broad front, and it's a, let me say, target-rich environment. You can hardly make a mistake just by getting started. One of the first things that we did, we were discussing this backstage, is we put up a new website. If for no other reason than to do the layup, than to demonstrate to ourselves and demonstrate to our stakeholders that change is happening and bigger changes are about to happen. And you'd be surprised the impact on morale, the impact on confidence, and really the impact on trust that it's had inside and outside the agency. So that's a trivial example, but it was a crucially important one. It's been up for about a year now. Behind that are things like automating the claims processing system. I'm going to give you a specific example. A year ago, if you had an application for claims disability, you could expect on average to wait about 160 days. That's a number that's going up right now. It's probably worse today than it was a year ago. The number that's commonly reported in the newspapers is about 1 million claims in backlog. It ends up that that's not fair and it's not right, but it's what everybody thinks, so it's what we say. That number's going up. And so all you see in front of you is this mountain of problems. So you have two choices. You can effectively try to do everything all at once. Hey, thanks for the specifications, thanks for the requirements, I'll see you in a year. Can I have $100 million? Or $1 billion, depends on the problem. And then I'll come back later and tell you how it worked out. Or you can do this in very, very incremental ways. It sounds boring. It sounds actually not very revolutionary. But the revolution actually takes place inside of the agency. It's the culture. It's trust in the leadership. It's confidence in your coworker. It's the ability to take the advocacy role to a new level. So
it's also honesty about the measures that you're using for yourself.
I'm sorry?
It's also honesty about the measures that you're using.
Absolutely.
Because when you disclose that our time to process claims is such and such, and going up, then that creates a certain pressure to fix that.
Exactly right. So I was going to tell you what would have happened a year ago. So mostly, if you were interested in the status of your application, and keep in mind, these are people who've served our country honorably and have some kind of disability, many of them catastrophic, many of them limiting mobility, limiting their ability to function in society, get a job, get better training, participate in life in the way that many of us would just take for granted. And so now they have to come in to a regional office and ask, and maybe they would be told, and maybe they wouldn't be told. Now, it wasn't because the poor service representative didn't want to say. Sometimes they felt that they weren't allowed to. That's an easy fix, right? You're now allowed to say anything that you know. But mostly because the underlying systems didn't talk to each other. We were, one bad diode away from a system that we were keeping together with baling wire and Band-Aids just to get the claims from one particular process to another. These are all fixable problems, but they're problems that have to be fixed. So about a year ago, we announced something called e-benefits, where you can go now to a website, and for the first time ever, you don't have to make a phone call. We get millions of phone calls a year. You don't have to physically go to a regional office. You can go to a website and see where you are in the claims process. And oh, by the way, you'll find out if we're waiting for you to give us something back. It's a very specific example.
Creating feedback loops is absolutely critical in all of these things. So exactly in the past, it might well have been that nobody knew that you were waiting on them.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that was the typical
goes
case.
into the black hole.
Yeah. But of course it's worse, right? Because if mostly we didn't know. If we didn't know, we weren't sure if we could tell you. And if we could tell you, that meant that you had to call us. And I don't know if last time you've ever tried to call somebody at the VA, but it's not so easy. Doing this with web-enabled services, what the three of us would certainly consider modern, contemporary component commodity services, is a much better way of providing
So let me ask this question. You have this problem. People like the IRS have this problem. It's across all of government. To what extent do you solve it and then they go solve it separately? To what extent do we need to start thinking about, sort of customer service as a platform capability that gets applied across government agencies? To what extent could, for example, private sector initiatives like Get Satisfaction be used as a template for how do we actually build this new capability and then it's available for any agency?
Yeah, that's a great question. I love that question. There's no high-tech answer to that. The president has convened an innovation consortium. The CTOs of most of the major agencies are represented, and we get together regularly every 3 weeks or so. There's a designated speaker, so somebody comes in and talks about their problems. I was the speaker a few weeks ago, and I came in with a red stovepipe. And that was my prop for my 20-minute talk. I didn't have 25 slides. I had a red stovepipe, and I said, that's my problem right there. So we were working on something you might have heard about recently called the Blue Button.
Yes.
VA was a very eager part of that consortium. Ours is live already, and we were talking about our ability to interoperate with this very, very simple kind of personal health record, our ability to interoperate with places like the DoD or places like CMS. We're actually getting better cooperation, better support on the outside. So at the end of the day, it's all about dialogue and communication, all the stuff that the two of you face in the private sector, being the CEO and CTO of large and small companies. We just have that at massive scale inside the government. Whatever the culture is that inhibits people phoning each other or writing an email or calling a cool meeting at the White House.
We're out of time, but Thor, I want to give you just a minute to tell us, based on what you've seen, do you have any thoughts about customer service best practices from the private sector that could be applied in government?
Sure. Well, I think that customer service is a potential Trojan horse for a new kind of engagement. We see this all the time. Customers, when they have questions or they're confused or they want to be involved, are customers or constituents that they're most engaged. And so creating the mechanisms for them to do that, in our case, in the form of a community space, is an easy way and I think a compelling way to do that. The temptation is to do half measures or to I think that, for instance, collecting ideas is a great place to start, but the challenge, as anybody who's run an idea marketplace knows, is once you get 10,000 ideas, how do you process those? Actually building the internal behavior to communicate to people about what's happening around ideas and around the principles that make decision-making happen internally, and then the roadmap that incorporates those ideas, that's the bigger problem. And then another aspect of this is how can you leverage these communities to take initiative themselves? A lot of these ideas probably best for citizens to do. That's where I think some of the initiatives we're seeing around APIs, for instance, with the FCC, I think we'll see an incredible innovation coming out of just the availability of some of those APIs.
Yeah.
So,
all right. Thank you very much. I wish we had more time to talk about it. It's such an important issue. But I think you're absolutely right. We talk a lot about engagement, and the way that customer service is actually one of the best ways to begin the process of engagement. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nicely done.